telling my husband I don't care that he might have a degenerative disease? My husband, 35, has been complaining about the muscles in one of his arms twitching for a week and he's convinced he has ALS. He came home from work today and said his mouth was salivating more than normal and informed me that's a symptom of ALS. When he first told me he was concerned, my immediate reaction was, obviously, fear and concern, so I asked him if he would please call a doctor the next day. He jumped down my throat for not having any sympathy, so I shut up and walked away. He has a history of complaining about his health and not doing anything about it. He complained about groin pain for the first 10 years of our relationship, and I got sick of hearing about it, so every time he complained I would ask if he had called a doctor yet. The answer was always no. We were on a hiking trip 3 years ago, and when we got back to the cabin he was laying on the sofa and said he felt a bulge in his groin. I immediately knew it was a hernia and told him to make an appointment ASAP. It took withholding sex before he would finally go to a doctor, where he was diagnosed with massive bilateral hernias. So yeah, my sympathy for his health complaints is gone. I feel like he should seek the advice and guidance of a professional if he thinks something is very wrong, because I'm as far from being in the medical field as one can get. I've tried making his appointments for him in the past, but he either just wouldn't go or would cancel them. Back to the ALS concern. Tonight when he got home and informed me about his watery mouth, I asked him if he had called our healthcare provider today. He said no. I calmly asked him why not, and then said I was concerned that he thought he had a serious degenerative disease but wouldn't do anything about it. An argument ensued and he called me a "see you next Tuesday" for not having any sympathy for his ailments. I told him I really didn't care if he thought he had a serious disease. What I do care about is if he has a serious disease, knowing that we will tackle it once there's a diagnosis. I'm not remotely interested in coddling his hypochondria. Comment 1. At first I thought you were, but then thinking of the months and months and months of my husband complaining about his teeth and never going to the dentist. Then his tooth started chipping, so he finally went in, and it's worse than he thought it would even be. So NTA. Comment 2. NTA. He wants all the sympathy and care that would go to someone who was seriously ill, without the pesky suffering that would come from having an actual illness. If he goes to the doctor and finds out he's fine, he can't milk it anymore. Comment 3. NTA. Some people have a mental thing where they assume that the ritual of getting other people's sympathy is all they need. They can't imagine enjoying actually getting better, by going to a doctor and finding out what is wrong and following the doctor's instructions in order to solve the problem. It sounds uncomfy. They also can't figure out that if they go on applying sympathy to a steadily worsening medical issue, that medical issue may well kill them, and then they won't be able to follow their ritual anymore. Source: parent who died after refusing to do the work to get better, because immediately feeling better was just so important to her. You have my permission to show this to him if you think it'll help. Asking the lady sitting next to me at a concert to stop knitting. I went to a concert tonight at a seated venue to see a folk singer. The music is relatively tame/quiet and fairly emotional, in my opinion. Seeing this artist is a pretty immersive music experience, at least for me. I was really excited to see this particular show at a seated theater where it's easier to just focus on the music. I'd venture a guess that most of the people who would go to this type of show are going because they're emotionally invested in this person's music. The show starts, and I notice the woman sitting directly next to me is knitting. Odd, I thought, but okay. But as the show went on, I kept finding myself so distracted by this knitting. I must have tried for a solid 30 minutes to ignore it, but the constant motion in my peripheral vision plus the quiet clicking of the needles kept stealing my attention away from the show. After a while, I felt like I couldn't focus on the show at all, and all I could think about was whether I should try to politely say something. The woman was with a partner, and I noticed on their other side there were 2 to 3 open seats. So I finally worked up the courage to politely say something. I thought the best and least disruptive way to do that was to write a note on my phone and show it to her, so that's what I did. The note said, "This is a direct copy/paste I'm so sorry to ask, and I know this is probably ridiculous, but the knitting is distracting me from enjoying the show. Would you mind either stopping or moving one seat over? Again, I'm sorry. I assumed anyone who knitted in public, and especially someone at this kind of very chill show, was probably a generally chill human, so I was not expecting the kind of negative reaction that followed. The woman gave me the nastiest look, let out an angry sigh, threw her hands up, dramatically stuffed her knitting stuff into her bag, huffed and puffed to her partner, and then got up and completely left the show. I was so baffled by how angry she got, especially since I tried really hard to phrase this as politely as I could. I even considered that maybe there are reasons beyond my understanding why someone might not be able to sit still during a show and might need to keep their hands busy. Neurodivergence? Some sort of recovery? Some other reason? So I really tried to avoid speaking up out of sensitivity, and again it's why I included the suggestion that maybe she could just slide over instead of stopping completely. I realized that knitting is definitely not the most disruptive thing a person could do, and I couldn't tell if me asking her to stop was unreasonable and maybe I should have just sew it up, but I thought I was polite about it, and I'm still just really shocked at how mad she got and even more shocked that she completely left the show halfway through the set. Comment 1. OP is absolutely NTA. Anyone saying otherwise has never been to a stripped-down folk, acoustic show. You can hear a pin drop as the audiences are generally very quiet, similar to a classical concert. The clickety-clack of knitting needles would certainly be audible, and would certainly be distracting if you were sat close. Plus, as someone who has played dozens of shows like this, seeing someone in the audience just knitting away would be demoralizing as a performer and would feel pretty disrespectful. I don't knit, so I would assume it had their full attention and they weren't particularly interested in my music. Comment 2. NTA. Anyone who'd walk out on a music performance if she can't knit her way through it is on her own. You were entirely within bounds making a reasonable request to remove a distracting activity, not customary at this sort of a public gathering, out of your peripheral view and earshot. Your suggestion was polite and considerate. The lady was the problem, not you. Comment 3. NTA. You asked nicely, and moving one chair over seems like a reasonable suggestion. I find the clicking of needles to be a soothing sound when I knit, but I agree that it's definitely a sound that isn't easy to ignore, especially if they're metal. Her reaction was pretty out of proportion to the ask. Reminding my brother that it's his fault he didn't get to raise my niece? He went to prison for identity theft and forgery when my niece, now 18, was only 7 years old. I raised her from the point. Now that he is out, he has visited us a few of times. The first visit was a little bit awkward. I had asked my niece if she is ready and she said yes, but it was still a little weird. On the second one, it was better. The third visit, he found out that I had allowed her to do boxing since she was 10 and that she's still taking classes with a personal trainer every week. My brother got really upset about it. He then said girls shouldn't do boxing and that I had failed as an uncle. And I was just standing there, stunned for a moment. Then I asked, should I have committed forgery and gotten sent to prison like you instead? It's your fault you weren't around to make the choices. In hindsight, I realized it was kind of a dick move from me to say that to someone who just got out not too long ago, but I was just so pissed at the moment. Our mother also called me later that night to say I didn't have to throw that in his face that way. Should I have just held my tongue? Comment 1. NTA. He opted not to be there for her and it doesn't seem like he tried to do any parenting from behind bars. If he's upset about the past, it's his way of deflecting the blame and maybe he needed that reminder from you, as harsh as it may have felt. Comment 2. NTA. Yep. That was definitely a low blow, but what he said was far worse. Not only to be so dismissive of your heroic effort to save your niece when he failed, but, much worse, saying you failed implies he's ashamed of who his daughter has become. And that's unforgivable. Comment 3. NTA. He forfeited his right to raise his child when he went to prison. Monday morning quarterbacking your raising of his child simply will not be tolerated. You failed as an uncle. Well, that's because you were busy being a dad, and your kid, yes yours, not his, knows it.
Refusing to let my fiancé's daughter's boyfriend move into my home. My 42 years fiancé, 37 years, wants her daughter, 18 years in high school, to move back home being my house. My fiancé had personal issues for the last 8 years and lost custody of her daughter at the beginning of those issues before I met her. For the past 5 years, we have worked really hard to get her back on track, and now doing very well. So well in fact that her daughter, who was about to turn 18, at the time decided it was the right time to come live with mom at my house. Well, that lasted all of a month when her daughter decided she was old enough to make her own decisions. Decided to move out and in with her boyfriend, 20-year-old, despite the pleas of her mom. Was an absolute mess. Hateful and horrible things were said. Just bad. She moved into where her boyfriend lives, and without saying too much, it's not a good place and some sketchy stuff goes on there. But as daughter said at the time, she's 18 and an adult. We can't stop her. Fast forward 4 months. Daughter and boyfriend don't like where they live. Mom now wants her daughter to come back home, but she wants her to be able to bring her boyfriend too. She won't come home without her boyfriend, mom says. I say no. Daughter can come home, but she's not bringing her boyfriend. Absolutely no. I don't agree with the situation at all. Daughter is still in high school, has no business moving in with a guy, and has made her own decision. I'm not going to be a part of it or support it. Daughter, yes. Boyfriend, no. Not that it matters, but it's my home. I pay every bill. I ask for no support. I get no financial help from my fiancé, but I give support. Not that it matters, I'd still say no to the boyfriend. Even if she were my own blood daughter. This decision seems like the deal breaker between me and my fiancé. She says we should help them out for a few months, help them get started. I still say no. I'm not the cause nor the answer to the situation. By denying daughter's boyfriend to live at my house, she will not come home. Mom thinks I'm in a hole who could have helped them get out of a bad situation and got her daughter home. Now I'm questioning. Comment 1. NTA, you're right to offer her daughter a safe space to escape to whenever she needs it. But you absolutely do not have to accept a stranger into your house, especially if you have reason not to trust them. If you don't know or trust this guy, it's absolutely okay for you to voice your concerns and put your foot down. Your partner should support you in this and should be telling her daughter that she has a safe space, but her boyfriend will have to find his own way. Comment 2. NTA. You don't approve of this, so you don't have to support it. For a woman living rent-free, she sure has a lot of demands. But you are seeing what marrying this woman would be like. If you don't placate her, she will emotionally manipulate you, since it seems she is making this out to be a deal breaker. Maybe you should let it be one. Comment 3. NTA. Unfortunately, this young woman will be learning a lot from the school of hard knocks, because she's lacked a lot of guidance and boundaries in her teenage years. Given some more time and your line in the sand, she will likely ask to move in with you guys without this boyfriend. I expect that will go as well the second time around as it did the first.